Martin Luther King Jr. was born in Atlanta, Georgia, January 15, 1929. His parents were the Reverend Martin Luther King Sr. and Alberta Williams. His parents were college educated, and his father was a successful pastor at a prestigious church known as Ebenezer Church in Atlanta. His family lived on Auburn Avenue, which was also called Sweet Auburn, known as Black Wall Street, the home to many of the country's largest and established black businesses and black churches before the Civil Rights Movement. It wasn't until the family went to Germany that his dad was inspired by Martin Luther. So he decided to change his name from Michael King to Martin Luther King, and his son's name from Michael King Jr. to Martin Luther King Jr. At the age of 6, one of Martin Luther King Jr.'s white playmates one day shared that he was no longer going to be able to play with him. He went on to share that his parents were not allowing him to play with him due to segregation and the color of his skin. As a young boy, Martin did not truly understand what was being said to him, but he did become very angry. This ignited the first spark to his journey towards civil rights justice and leadership. Martin Luther King Jr. went to Booker T. Washington High School, and he finished school early. By the time he was 15 years old, he attended Morehouse College. At Morehouse College, Martin Luther King Jr. was highly interested in studying law and medicine, but by his senior year, he had made the concrete decision to become a minister like his father. After college, King met Coretta Scott, who studied at the New England Conservatory of Music. They married in 1953 and had 4 children. During this time, segregation was heavy in Atlanta, and the ugly face of segregation and discrimination was really heavy. The sad idea that people were treated differently because of the way they looked or the color of their skin brought about a great sadness and depression. Segregation separated the races, and if a person was not white, they were not treated kindly or fairly. This was mostly directed toward the African American race. African Americans had to drink out of their own drinking fountains, use their own bathrooms, go to their own schools, if they were allowed to go at all, and sit at the back of the bus and special seating. Which leads us to December 1st, 1955. A woman by the name of Rosa Parks was tired from a long day at work and refused to sit in the back of the bus and give up her seat to a white person. This caused Rosa Parks to get arrested and spend the night in jail. Other African Americans were angry and created the Montgomery Improvement Association. They chose Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to be their leader. This was Dr. King's first civil rights action, in which he helped to organize a boycott against the public transportation system in Montgomery. The result? Dr. King's house was bombed, he was arrested, he was treated very harshly. But through it all, they all prevailed and won, and the segregation against buses or on buses came to an end. This is famously known as the Montgomery Bus Boycott. Soon, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was adopted as a civil rights leader for all African Americans. He also fought for any American who was being treated in an unlawful and unfair manner. He was inspired by India's Mohandas Gandhi, who was also a social activist in his country. Mohandas Gandhi believed in peaceful, nonviolent protest, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. took on this same concept and began fighting justice in a calm and peaceful manner as well. Soon came many marches, and thousands of people began supporting the civil rights movement. They marched and protested alongside Dr. King for justice. His loving wife, Coretta Scott King, would hold his hand as they led many of the marches together on the front line. But not all white people believed in segregation and discrimination. There were some good white people out there that wanted to help, so they too decided to march with Dr. King to help fight for equality. Martin Luther King Jr. sacrificed a lot, including his own family, to help fight for freedom. Martin Luther King Jr. was jailed 29 times, threatened by many white people, but he refused to give up. Dr. King not only believed for justice for African Americans, but all people and all races. Martin Luther King Jr. was the youngest man in history to ever receive a Nobel Peace Prize. And in 1963, Martin Luther King Jr. helped to organize the famous March on Washington. Did you know over 250,000 people attended this march in an effort to show the importance of civil rights legislation? It was at this march where Martin gave his "I Have a Dream" speech, a speech that outlined his dream for America and all American people to be treated fairly, a speech that also revealed that Dr. King did not know if he would even make it alive to see the fruits of his labor and witness his dream come true. But he knew someday that it would happen. This speech has become one of the most famous speeches in history. The March on Washington resulted in a success that no one could ever imagine. The Civil Rights Act was passed a year later in 1964. Well, sadly, Dr. King's revelation did come to pass, and on April 4, 1968, in Memphis, Tennessee, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was shot and killed by a white man named James Earl Ray. Dr. King was shot on a hotel balcony, and it was that day that the country heavily mourned and cried. A wife lost a husband, 4 children lost a dad, and the country lost an amazing leader whose heart was filled with nothing but love and kindness for people. But his dream definitely did not die. Today, there are over 900 streets named after Dr. King. A national holiday was established after him, and he is celebrated every January, and a memorial has been built in Washington to honor him. Because of Martin Luther King Jr., many more cultures reside in America living among one another, and segregation has officially ended in many of the areas that Dr. King fought for. There is still justice to be sought after, and we will always have to fight for equality in some form or fashion. But at least the doors of freedom have been unlocked and opened for the American government and world to listen. Thank you, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., for your great sacrifice.